Tarkov is an extremely complex and detailed game with far more moving parts than meets the eye. So whether you're brand new to the game or experienced, I've done my very best to make sure there are things in here to help you out. This video has my top 101 tips and tricks, some of which I've learned even this past month despite having played this game for over 4 years. And if you've already seen my older 50 tips video, don't worry, there's very little overlap between them. This game is still in development and things can change at any time, so I'll be sure to update any of the tips in the description below as needed. That said, welcome to Tarkov 101. Looting and making money are an essential part of your lifeblood in EFT, so let's start there. If you randomly see a white dot in the center of your screen, that's your perception skill letting you know that there's an object nearby you can interact with, which is often loose loot. It may even be hidden under a texture on a table or floor, so always pause to look around when you see it pop up. As your perception skill rises, the range of this dot will as well. If you're not going to use your melee weapon for a particular raid, don't bring it. Not only will you keep your PMC a bit lighter, but you can grab the melee weapon off any dead scav, boss, or raider, and you'll actually keep it if you die. In some cases this won't be worth a lot, but in others you might find something a lot more valuable to sell, but in any case it's free money. Note that you cannot loot the melee weapon from dead PMCs. There are a few rails in the game that'll currently hold a number of attachments. Take this XRSU for example. It'll hold 2 different optics, one of which can be fairly large, 2 tactical devices, and a foregrip. If you mount this rail onto an AK gas block, it only takes up 1 inventory slot. I take an empty one of these with me in my secure container wherever I go, since you'll end up keeping anything you stick on there if you die to use or sell later. Once you can get a hold of a documents bag, I can't recommend them enough, especially for newer players. You can fit tons of items in here, particularly those that tend to spawn in safes and filing cabinets such as money, keys, key cards, diaries, flash drives, SSDs, GP coins, and more. And as with the previous tips, you'll keep all this stuff even if you die, since the docs bag and all its contents will be within your secure container. Jackets are also your friend and have a chance to spawn all sorts of rare keys as well as money and other useful things you might be able to stick in that docs bag, not to mention just decent items in general. Another loot goblin technique is to grab any chest rig from dead players and scavs that have more space inside than they take up. This M33 rig, for example, takes up 12 slots in my backpack but can fit 16 slots of loot inside for a net gain of 4, not to mention the value of the rig itself. Getting all that loot won't do you much good if you keep getting killed while you're shuffling around with all those items, so make sure you do it from safety. Try to loot from cover or concealment when you can, and go prone when you can't. It's a lot easier to spot a guy who's just kneeling or standing in one place than one who's laying down next to a dead body, and you might even be mistaken for another dead body and get the drop on someone. When looting a container such as a duffel bag or weapon crate, there is a small moment in between when you press F to loot it and when you actually begin looting it where you can queue up a movement action. Use this to lean in behind a wall, crouch, or even prone if there's enough space to do so. Again, you'll be harder to spot this way while you're busy in your inventory. Now I get asked about this a lot during my live streams, but you can actually quick swap out of your gear into someone else's by hovering the new item over the desired slot where you already have something equipped, pressing your discard hotkey, which is delete by default, then letting go of theirs to equip it. This is great when someone has better gear than you do, especially if yours is insured. Speaking of looting faster in general, control clicking an item will move it to the first available slot in your inventory, while alt clicking will move an equipable item to an available equipment slot such as a helmet or secondary weapon. This works both within your stash screen and in raid when looting containers or dead bodies. You get a set amount of bonus XP just for walking up to a dead body and pressing F before you actually take anything based on what's actually on that body. The base amount is 20 XP, so if you receive just 20, you know that person has nothing else on them at all. The higher the number, the more stuff they have on them and the more worth your time it may be to take a look. You also gain a bit of bonus XP for each individual item you pick up for the first time in every raid. Value per slot is a thing, and it may take you a long time to learn what items are worth, but try to get in the mindset of per slot value when you're picking something up with the intent to sell. For example, I know I can trade this drill for an Osprey suppressor from Mechanic and then sell him that same suppressor for about 22,000 rubles, so I know a drill is worth at least 22,000 rubles to me. But divided by the 4 slots it takes up in my inventory, it's really only worth a little over 5,000 rubles per slot. Conversely, I know if something like matches sells for around 15,000 on the flea market, then looting 4 items of around that value is effectively worth 60,000 rubles to me in those same 4 slots. slots. Try not to overthink it like crazy though. You don't need to min-max every single inventory slot, but just keeping an awareness around this mindset will make you a much better looter over time. The same logic applies to weapons, which are also heavy. If you see a modded weapon that you can equip into your secondary or even replace your own with, great. But once you find another that's about to go into your backpack, consider stripping the attachments from it instead. They're lighter and more valuable than the base chassis anyway, plus if you're bringing in one of those AK rails like we went over earlier, you'll be able to secure those attachments as well. Learn a hidden stash route. These can spawn nearly any item in the game and can make you a ton of money. I'll link a video to a fast and easy stash route down in the description for you to check out later. On that note, if you're finding these tips useful so far, consider leaving a like as it'll really help other players find this video in the future, and feel free to drop by my live stream if you have questions or want to learn more about the game firsthand. Link for that down in the description. Let's move on to some useful menu and stash related tips. There's actually a notes section in your task tab where you can write anything you want to remember. This is especially useful as a shopping list to remember the laundry list of items you'll be searching for at any given time for hideout upgrades or for a task. Speaking of which, there's actually an off-raid inventory for your quest-specific items. So if you're on something like Delivery from the Past where you have to pick up a folder in the big red building on Customs, then stash it later on Factory, you can actually drop it off once you're out of your Customs raid if you don't feel like going straight into Factory. Just remember to transfer it back when you're ready to continue that task. Your inventory space will fill up fast. One thing you can do early on is stack all your backpacks inside one another, and you can even fill the innermost backpack with random stuff you don't feel like you'll need for a long time. Later in life, you'll want to get a hold of some containers. I have a short guide explaining how to get all the containers in the game, which I'll leave a link for down in the description. As mentioned with the looting tips earlier, there are several chest rigs in the game which take up less space than they hold. Use this to your advantage, especially early on. If you take a look at what Fence is selling from time to time, he'll often have a nearly broken AVS or other armored rigs for a very low price, which is great if you're just using them as storage. Taking the magazine and pistol grip off most rifles will shrink their overall size in your stash. Consider also selling your basic mags to vendors if you already have them unlocked to buy, since you barely lose any money in doing so and you'll have additional space that way. You can rotate items by holding left click to pick them up and pressing R. You can split stacks of ammo and other stackable items by control clicking and dragging, then use the slider or type the desired amount to split. You can more quickly examine unidentified items by hovering your mouse over them and clicking the middle mouse button. This also works with folding and unfolding stocks, which can also help make you a faster looter in raid. When you're done examining, you can get rid of those pesky handbook notifications by clicking on the green tab. To navigate your hideout, use WASD or just bump your mouse to the edge of the screen. You can walk around in there for extra immersion like a boss. To see the requirements to build or upgrade a module, click it from the scrolling menu at the bottom, which you can move around with your middle mouse wheel. The hideout is definitely worth upgrading as soon as you can afford to do so, as there are a number of crafts that can make you money at any given time, depending on the price of the ingredients versus the sell value, and anything you craft here counts as found in raid, which means you can sell it on the flea market or even turn them in for quests. Speaking of the flea market, once you've unlocked access to this crazy beast of a system, there are a lot of useful filters to take note of. I have a video on these explaining them in greater detail, but one really useful function is the linked search. Say you have an AK with a rail on top and you want to see what sites can attach to it, just right click the rail and run a linked search. This will bring up every attachment that can go on here. You can filter further by type, by traders only, and you can even filter out those pesky barters to see what's for sale for money only. There are a lot of other uses for linked search, so play around with it and you'll get used to how it operates quickly. You can also filter items by condition, which is useful for buying good condition armor only, as well as making sure you're buying meds and other consumables that aren't mostly used up. Many things are worth selling on the flea market if they have the found in raid tag. This refers to items that you survived a raid with, crafted in your hideout, or received as a reward for completing tasks as indicated by a small checkmark icon in the corner. Not everything sells for the best price on the flea though, so don't be afraid to check out the current flea market price versus what vendors are paying before you make a decision, and after a while you'll remember it as you go. Speaking of selling to the traders, each person pays different values for the things they'll buy. This is something that may change in the future, but at this time, Therapist pays the most for barter items and meds, Jaeger for melee weapons, shotguns and bolt action rifles, Mechanic for all other weapons and attachments, Ragman for clothing items, armor, helmets and your unwanted cases, and Peacekeeper pays the most for intelligence related items such as diaries and flash drives, but he pays in US dollars. Fence pays the least for just about everything, but you could treat him as your human dumpster for broken armor and helmets, since he's the only one who will buy them once their max durability is too low for Ragman. Trapper pays the most for grenades and flashbangs, and at this time, Skier doesn't pay the most for anything. You still may want to sell to him on occasion though if you're trying to level him up, which brings me to tip number 29, leveling traders. Traders will level up when you reach a certain money total dealt with them over time, which includes both buying from and selling to that person. If your PMC already meets the level requirement and reputation needed to level that trader, consider buying something from that person in small quantities and selling it right back to them for a small loss, but very quick gains on the overall money total you've dealt with them. If that trader sells currency like Peacekeeper and Skier, consider exchanging rubles for dollars or euro with them for effectively no monetary loss to you overall. Before you head into a raid, there's a lot to consider to properly prepare yourself, and it all starts with learning the maps. If you don't know where your objectives are, and more importantly your extracts, you're already heading in without much chance of survival. I'll leave a link in the description for some great Tarkov maps which you can bring up on a second monitor, an iPad, or even just on your phone while you play to use as a reference until you have them memorized. I find it best to learn one map at a time, alternating your PMC and player scav on it to get the lay of the land more quickly, but however you feel like doing it is fine. One of the nice things about Tarkov is how open-ended it really is, so there's really no wrong answer here. If you're new and looking for some direction though, I'd recommend starting with customs since a bunch of your earliest tasks take place here. The damage you deal in Escape from Tarkov is completely dependent on the ammo you use and not the gun, unlike many other shooters. You can one-shot people with completely unmodded weapons and good ammo while conversely struggling to kill someone with an awesome gun that has garbage ammunition. There's a link in the description to a great ammo chart created and maintained by No Food After Midnight, which really helps break down each ammo type and its viability versus different armors in the game. It may feel overwhelming at first, but you don't need to memorize it all, just start with a few rounds with decent stats that are affordable and build your kits around that. There are a few calibers in the game which are interchangeable with different weapon types but won't actually fire from that weapon. The Vepr 209, for example, uses the same magazines as a Vepr 136 or AKM, but if you load the 209 with 7.62x39 ammo or load an AKM with 3.66 ammo, that weapon will turn red and not fire. The same is true for the MCX versus the M4 and other calibers, but if you're not sure, try putting one round in the chamber before filling your mags with that same ammo to be absolutely certain. Face covers are a good idea as they help conceal that bright globe of a head, especially in darker areas. Glasses, contrary to real life, actually help reduce the number of raindrops on your screen. They also help reduce the effects from flashbangs in varying amounts, and there are even anti-fragmentation glasses which give a small amount of armor versus low penetrating rounds and may actually save your life from stray buckshot. There are various headsets in the game which change your sound by amplifying quieter noises like rain and footsteps and dampening louder ones like gunshots. If you're solo, these are especially important since you know you can shoot anything that moves without second guessing, and you'll be able to hear people coming sooner if you're busy looting or repacking magazine. Generally speaking, they all do the same thing with different sound profiles, so just try each one out until you find one you prefer. Energy and hydration will slowly deplete while in raid, and even faster if you're overweight or have your stomach blown out, both of which we'll cover in a bit. If you're planning on going onto a larger map where you know you might be there for a while, consider bringing a cheap snack. Knowing where food is likely to spawn is also important in a pinch, which you'll learn over time, but duffel bags have a higher chance of food than most other containers as a general tip. On the map screen, before you choose a time for your raid, you can see the minimum and maximum player count for each map, which can help give you an idea how many PMCs you have a chance to run into. Before you go in any map other than labs, you can choose daytime or nighttime. The difference between the two, besides the obvious, is that night raids are typically far less populated than day raids, which can make them great for completing tasks, especially if it's a map you know well. I actually recommend ensuring your entire loadout every time, only because the price at which you can sell anything back to the vendor is less than the insurance price, so even if you're going in with gear you don't even want back, odds are other players won't want it either, and you'll effectively be making money there as well. Plus, I can't tell you how many times I've died to a Scav or Scav boss and just never gotten looted at all since no one found the body. Additionally, this will allow you to fraud your gear by hiding it in a bush or dark corner somewhere when you found something better to continue the raid with. Offline mode is your friend. You don't gain or lose anything in offline mode, so it's a great way to practice with a new weapon versus the Scavs, or even learn a map better with the Scavs off so you can be free to explore every little corner and find every little container you want to. Always go into each raid with a goal if you can. Maybe you're working on a task or trying to focus on filling that documents bag, so you choose a map with more filing cabinets, or maybe you just want to level your sniper skills so you head to a longer range map. Whatever the case, having goals at the start will not only help you stay focused, but also keep the game more enjoyable for you in the long run, in my opinion. Gear fear is a pretty common thing in this game, but try not to be afraid to use and eventually lose your gear. This game will eventually wipe from time to time, but your personal experience is something that will carry over with you. I have a 3-minute video on gear fear which will help you out a lot if this is something you struggle with. Link in the description. Playing with friends is another great way to help with tasks, gear fear, and even insurance fraud, since you have a buddy with you who can toss your stuff if you die. We have a huge Discord group full of only Tarkov players and people looking to play all the time, so feel free to join. Link in the description. We have a very friendly community which can be a great asset. Just, you know, contribute to that vibe while you're there. Your kill zones in EFT are the head and thorax, meaning if either of these two body parts gets directly damaged down to 0, you die. There is a slim chance for either of these body parts to reach 0 or blacken out due to bleeding or other damage over time effects, which will not kill you on the spot, but further damage to either of those areas will result in immediate demise. Blackened legs will leave you limping and unable to run unless on a painkiller effect. Blackened arms will cause your aim to be incredibly shaky and slow, and a blackened stomach will make your energy and hydration deplete rapidly. Receiving further damage to blackened limbs will multiply that damage, spreading it evenly amongst all remaining body parts. You can fix your arms, legs, and stomach by using a surgery kit, but not your head or thorax. There are different types of surgery kits in EFT. The CMS has a slightly shorter use time and takes up less inventory space than the Serv 12, but restores less maximum health to the repaired limb. The Serv 12 can also restore fractures. They're both quite useful, but I prefer the Serv 12 for longer raids, especially when I'm geared for that greater maximum health restoration, and the CMS for quicker loot runs or smaller maps like Factory where the shorter use time may prove more important. Some med kits can heal both light and heavy bleeds while others cannot. Double click any medical item to inspect it, you'll see a hit point cost associated with any bleed that kit can heal. Note that heavy bleeds absorb a significant portion of your med kit, so it's highly advisable to bring something like a CAT or S-Mark tourniquet or Calic B hemostat to help take the heavy lifting off your medical supply. Therapist also has a healing service at the end of raid, which is free for the first few levels, then costs a bit more depending on how damaged you are. Healing this way is convenient, but if you want to milk a little more value in the form of XP, consider keeping a Grizzly medkit in your stash to heal up with after your raid instead, as doing so will grant all appropriate healing XP just the same as if you'd done it in raid. You can quick bind your meds to numbers 4 through 0 on your keyboard by hovering that item and pressing the desired hotkey, or by dragging it to the desired button. Keep in mind that they must be within your chest rig or pockets. Let's move on to some combat and movement related tips. You can quick bind any weapon that fits into your chest rig. This is great for snipers who want to keep a low profile by not having a gun on their back while prone, and also allows you to whip out a pocket SMG for close encounters. You could even run a small sniper rifle as a backup weapon for longer range shots, or to level your sniper skill while you're using your preferred weapon of choice as your main. You can blind fire over short cover by pressing Alt and W, or around left corners with Alt S. When pressing G to throw a grenade, the game will always throw ones in your leftmost pocket first, followed by your leftmost chest rig slot, then going top to bottom if you have them lined vertically in the rig. This is important to know if you want to alternate frags with flashbangs, or if you want to use shorter fuse grenades first. Speaking of which, VOG grenades currently have the shortest fuse times, with RGD F1s in the middle and M67s with the longest. Short fuse times are an excellent way for getting unexpected kills, as your target will have less time to react. Longer fuses can allow for some really cool plays, since most people will instinctively run as soon as they hear a grenade land, and this might allow you enough time to push and shoot them as they run and still get back out safely. You can zero your optics by pressing page up or page down while zoomed in. This is mostly useful for long range sniping if your target is over 100 meters away. You can adjust your crouch height by holding the crouch key and scrolling your mouse wheel. This can open up some really interesting peaks that normal crouching can't achieve. You can adjust your movement speed similarly by scrolling the mouse wheel. Caps lock will instantly drop your move speed all the way to the minimum, and pressing it again will go back to max. Moving slower allows you to hear better over your own footsteps and also makes you quieter to other players. That said, crab walking around everywhere, especially in open spaces, will get you killed, as you'll be an easy target. Learning when to run and when to sneak come with experience, but as a general tip, it's usually best to run through bigger open areas and slow it down once you get to some cover to pause and listen. Then you can choose to sneak or keep moving as the situation demands. Tarkov is an incredibly sound-based game, and just about everything you do can be heard by nearby players. Don't let that stress you out too much, since it works both ways. Again, try not to get in the habit of crab walking everywhere, but just be mindful that if you're always running out in the open, eventually someone will hear you before you hear them and will likely wait a moment for an easy ambush. You can lean left and right with Q and E, but you can also do a sidestep peek with Alt, Q, or E. These peeks can sometimes surprise other players, especially when crouched, which may give you the extra fraction of a second to shoot first. Prone leaning works with the same hotkeys Q and E, and Alt, Q, and E will make your PMC roll further to the side, which can open up some even more devious and unexpected peek spots. Going prone also reduces your recoil significantly. You can perform a combat reload by double tapping R. This will make you reload slightly faster than normal at the cost of dropping your current mag. As a bonus tip, if you rebind your combat reload to a different button, it'll make the animation slightly faster since the game client won't be waiting for that second input of the R key. If you hold R and scroll your mouse wheel, you can actually choose which magazine to reload into. By default, just pressing R will make your PMC choose the one with the most ammunition in it. You can also choose between various shotgun shells or cartridges in certain rifles. Speaking of which, you can cancel prolonged animations by left-clicking once and waiting for the current portion of the animation to finish. This is useful if you get pushed while reloading several shells into a shotgun. If you panic and click multiple times, you'll queue up multiple actions and start firing as soon as the most recent shell goes in. You can also cancel food and medical animations, including surgery kits, but some take longer than others. Learn where other PMCs spawn. The more you play a certain map, the more you'll be able to take note of where you've spawned before and therefore where somewhere else might be. There are great maps on the Tarkov wiki as well to help with this, which I'll leave a link for in the description. Pressing V will take out your melee weapon, but double tapping V will do a quick swing, then immediately bring your gun back up. This is especially useful for breaking through glass. You can shoot out most lights, which is great for night raids, and really useful to smash half-broken lights, which otherwise continue to make lots of noise and make it more difficult for you to hear footsteps. Speaking of night raids, you can turn your night vision on and off with the N key. This also works for face shields. Learn from every death. No matter what happened to you or how bad it feels in the moment to die with a bunch of loot, try to ask yourself something you could have done better. Maybe you got killed from a really unexpected angle you didn't know about. Well, he just showed you a great spot and now that's your spot too. Always look for unexpected angles yourself to throw off your enemy. Try jumping on a table or barrel you've never seen anyone else on before. You'd be surprised how often you can throw off even the most experienced of players with interesting angles. Learn to read the room. The more you play a map, the more you'll begin to notice when doors are not in their default position and there are less subtle things like containers that are already looted, dead players and scavs, and whether or not they're looted yet. Pair this knowledge with your growing knowledge of PMC spawns to help predict where those people might go next to hone your tracking skills. Speaking of tracking, the more you hear gunshots, the more you'll start to learn what each weapon sounds like. For the time being, try to take note of any shots you hear and whether successive shots from that same weapon appear to be getting closer or farther from you, and whether they sound muffled, which could indicate the person is indoors and help narrow their position to you. These are all things that can help you determine whether you want to pursue or avoid a firefight. Watchdogs. If you see a scav that's farther away who hasn't spotted you, consider leaving him alive as a sort of alarm system. If he starts yelling or shooting at someone else, you know another PMC is near. Take your time when moving through a raid. Pause to listen often for footsteps or other noises, especially when entering a new building for the first time. Learn from others. This game very much rewards those who take the time to learn it, and since you've watched this far, you're already ahead of the pack. Come by my stream and hang out if you'd like to learn more from my playstyle. There are tons of other great content creators out there as well, and you might be surprised how different some playstyles can be from one another and what bits and pieces you might take from other people. On that note, I also have several heavily edited playthrough series on this channel as well, which I'll link in the description, so consider checking those out too for more in-depth PvP tips. Speaking of PvP, the best thing you can do during a firefight is keep your opponent guessing. If you exchange fire with someone who makes it back behind cover, don't just sit still and freeze up, stay on the move. Even a slight adjustment in your position can make him re-peek the wrong angle and give you that extra moment you need to shoot first. Sometimes it's better to reset the fight completely if you're injured, outnumbered, or outgunned. It's okay to fall back. Using grenades and flashbangs to cover your retreat can generally stop someone's push enough to give you more space. If you're actively being shot from behind while you run, looking down can actually hide your head from that person's view. It may seem a bit silly, but it's better to take hits in other body parts and potentially live to fight another day if it comes down to that. If you're behind half cover such as sandbag walls, looking down will also hide the top of your head from view from the other side. Make sure you bring extra ammo with you in raids. You can slowly top off your magazines while you perform other actions such as looting containers, though I expect this to change in the future once we get reloading animations. The middle mouse button can also be used to get a rough estimate on how much ammo is left in mags within your inventory, and Alt-T will check your current magazine. Keeping these topped off keeps you better prepared for your next firefight. Keep track of your weight. The more you carry, the more debuffs you'll start to incur. When you're partially overweight, your walk speed will become slower and stamina will drain faster. If you go way overboard with the looting, you may need to drop some stuff to be able to run again. Always check this little debuff symbol near your character's health pool for more details if you're not sure. Running out of stamina in an open field can make you a pretty easy loot pinata for someone else. Aiming down sights is always more accurate, but you can actually fire from your shoulder pretty effectively in Escape from Tarkov, and lasers will give you a recoil reduction when doing so. The downside, of course, is that you're shining a laser on the wall wherever you go, so consider turning it off when you're holding an angle on someone to not give away your position. Just about everything you do in Raid will level your skills in some way. For example, eating and drinking will raise your metabolism skill, while throwing grenades and moving while overweight helps raise strength. Check out your skills tab to get an idea what bonuses you're receiving from your current skills and what you can unlock later. For the most part, I find it best to let these level naturally as you play through your raids, but if there's a certain skill you're trying to level faster, there are plenty of guides out there for each. You can bring up the comms wheel in game by double tapping Y. From here, you can right click any of these options and bind them to F1 through F12. You can actually set these up from your hideout or in an offline raid, and it'll save over into your online raid, so don't worry about doing that in an actual raid.
Nice move!
When playing as your scav, just about all the above applies as well, but there are a few notable differences. Normal AI scavengers will not automatically be hostile to you unless you shoot or damage them in some way. If you get in a fight with another player scav, the AI will become angry only at the person who damaged the other one first, so be careful with this. If someone starts shooting at you first but misses and you retaliate and hit him first, the AI will be hostile to you and not him. It's an imperfect system and I expect this to develop more in the future, but that's how it works at the time of this recording. Additionally, AI scavs spawn more or less in gangs, meaning that only other nearby scavs from the same gang will be hostile to you if you engage them, but other groups of scavs on other parts of the maps will still initially be friendly. Bosses and raiders work a bit differently though. On your PMC, they'll engage you pretty much as soon as they spot you, but on your scav, you can get a little bit closer to bosses and raiders without triggering their aggro. Walk too close though, and all bets are off. Bosses and raiders have much larger health pools than players in normal AI scavs, and their aim is much better, so if you get in a shootout with them, never re-peek the same angle and instead try to flank them. A lot of these guys have pretty good armor, while some bosses don't wear armor at all, so when in doubt, aim for the face. Your scav actually has his own level and skill tree as well, and while you of course play as a different scav character every time, his level and skills carry over. It's even possible to unlock elite perks on your scav if you play them enough. Hold the middle mouse button down to free look. This is especially useful when running around to check for other players. It's also a great way to move your weapon off camera so you can take nice screenshots, which you can do by pressing the print screen button. Let's get into some really useful launcher and graphics settings that'll make your day in Tarkov go a lot smoother. To find any screenshots you've taken, head to your launcher, click the drop down menu, and you'll be able to access all your screenshots in one place there. The launcher is also where you can submit bug reports, and you can easily attach the screenshots you've taken here of any errors or bugs you're experiencing. This game is still in beta, so don't be shy about reporting any bugs you're experiencing for the good of the community. Above the play button, you'll also see an option to change your server. From here, you can sort by ping and select only the closest servers for the best connection, rather than leaving this on auto, which can sometimes choose a pretty laggy server for you. In your launcher settings, changing the when I close the launcher window to exit the launcher, and when I launch the game to exit the launcher completely will eliminate one more small process on your PC while you're playing this very CPU heavy game. Speaking of making your game run better, I have a short guide on many different things you can do to raise and even unlock your FPS, which I'll link in the description. As a basic overview though, it's important to understand that, as I mentioned, Tarkov is a very CPU heavy game, so if you're on a higher end PC, you'll likely experience better performance if you actually increase your graphics settings rather than lowering them to move more of the load onto your GPU. Another useful thing you can do at first is make sure your overall visibility is set to 1000. This will greatly help performance by not making the game draw terrain out further than you need it to, but will be far enough that it won't look strange. There are a lot of anti-aliasing options you should feel free to toy around with, especially in offline mode, but for the time being, TAA and TAA high seem to not only look best, but provide the best overall performance. For sound settings, you can adjust your overall volumes and music volume here. I recommend lowering your hideout volume quite a lot since it can get pretty loud in there, and dropping your interface volume to about half will help you be able to hear a little better when you're looting in Raid. The option for binaural sound at the bottom is for Steam audio. Clicking this on will cause you to have to restart the game. This will give you better directional sound, and at the time of this recording is a work in progress. In the future, this option will disappear when Steam audio becomes the main audio source for everyone. In the game tab, consider turning the auto RAM cleaner and use only physical cores option on if you're on a lower end PC. If you're on a relatively current gaming PC build, I'd leave these off. Field of view is an interesting subject. I have mine set to 59 since 59 vertical FOV is basically equivalent to 90 horizontal. This gives me a little bit more screen real estate to work with in RAID while avoiding any sighting and accuracy issues that have been known to come up at other FOV settings. There's really no wrong choice here though, and you can either dial yours way back to have everything appear bigger on your screen or push the number way up to be able to see further out. For post effects, I highly recommend going into an offline RAID to adjust these. You can get to your post effects by going into your settings, the post effects tab, turning on post effects, and then clicking visualize. Then just play around with the sliders and effects to your liking. Keep in mind that some settings may look great outside and not so great inside, and vice versa. You can get an in-game FPS counter by pressing the tilde key at the top left of your keyboard underneath the escape key to bring up the console. Type FPS space 1 and enter to turn the counter on. FPS 0 again will turn it back off. I wouldn't recommend leaving this on in real raids as it can impact performance a bit, but it's a great way to test out your graphics settings and post-effects settings in an offline raid. Like most shooters, you can remap your keybinds. I recommend mapping some settings to the thumb buttons on your mouse if you have any, which can be quite nice. I like to use mine to change fire mode and swap between optics. The Escape from Tarkov Sherpa program is a way for newer players to request a raid alongside a more experienced and approved Tarkov Sherpa. These are members of the community who devote some of their time to helping newer players learn the ropes of the game or complete a difficult task. There's a link to their site in the description for more info on how to request a Sherpa or even become one. This isn't actually my last tip for you, but as you probably know, the edition of the game you purchase determines which secure container you start with. That said, you can earn even larger ones by completing various tasks and barters, and I'm sure this will come as a huge shocker to you, but I have a video for that as well, which there's a link for in the description. I've got a few more things for you, including a bonus tip number 102, but before that, I want to thank all my channel supporters, and if you'd like to unlock sweet emotes and badges next to your name in the comments of any of my videos, as well as get your name into all future end credits, just click the blue join button next to the subscribe button for more info. You get these and more for just 99 cents, and it helps support future content on this channel tremendously. I also stream on Twitch 4 days a week, which there's a link for in the description. Tip number 102. If you purchased this game before or on Christmas of the previous year, then you'll have a Christmas gift waiting for you in your Escape from Tarkov profile. Just log in on their website, which is linked below, and there will be a large receive button if you have a gift. You can also take this time to link your Twitch profile with your EFT profile so that the next time they do a drop events on Twitch, you'll be all set to automatically start getting drops as you watch me or any other streamer who has them. If you have anything else to add or any input for this video or a future one, let me know in the comments below. Remember to like the video if you enjoyed it, and if you're new to the channel or just new to EFT in general, consider checking out one of these videos here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.